Hello, it's Mr. Grant, and I am here to again continue our discussion of slavery. And one of the things I want to bring to your attention is just our last assignment that we learned about cotton as a crop in the South. We read an article titled Cash Crops Made Slavery a Big Part of America's Early Economy, and that identified a few things. It identified why slave labor was needed in the American South and um, how they got slaves. We also identified that there were some compromises with the United States government and the Constitution to continue slavery, and then the impact of cotton moving from moving to the number one export in America. In fact, 50% of all exports were cotton, and 75% of the world's cotton production came from the United States and the slave labor. So we've learned a little bit about agricultural products in the South. Now that we know of cotton, we previously learned of the big three, which included indigo, rice, and tobacco. And now we have cotton superseding these products. Another product we need to talk about, which is also extremely large, is sugar. And our inquiry activity is, how did sugar feed slavery? And here we're going to answer some supporting questions with an inquiry process. So, questions we want to answer are: what conditions supported sugar production and slavery in the Western Hemisphere? How was sugar cultivated in the Western Hemisphere? And what was life like for enslaved Africans on sugar plantations in the Western Hemisphere? And this is the one I really want to focus on because we've learned about the Middle Passage conditions. Now we really want to look at what were the conditions like for the slaves working on a plantation. So let's take a little look. We know some of the products from the past. Um, let's think about products that are derived from inhuman labor practices. All right, can you think of any off the top of your head? You've probably heard of a few of them. Um, what I want to identify are some products that you may be familiar with, you may not be familiar with. Would you be willing to purchase these products if they were produced with slave labor? Would you be willing to purchase these products if they were produced with child labor? Okay, so what is your moral or ethical line? Where do you draw that line saying, well, that's not being done the right way, therefore I won't support it by buying it? Our economic power is strong in this country. So by purchasing or not purchasing a product, you're having your opinion, you're sharing your opinion with the people producing the product. So here's a short list for you. This list is a list of the top 12 products produced with child labor. And if we go through this list, you can see the number of countries producing the product with child labor. And right at the top is gold. And there's 18 countries that use children to produce gold. Now, how do you do that? Well, you dig in mines. It's backbreaking work. Uh, Children may go down in tunnels, mine shafts, and they have to dig out the gold ore out of the ground. Bolivia, Burkina Faso, Colombia, Democratic Republic of Congo, Ecuador, Ethiopia, Ghana, Guinea, Indonesia, Mali, Mongolia, Nicaragua, Niger, Peru, Philippines, Senegal, Suriname, and Tanzania. All of those countries use child labor for gold production. Other products on the list: bricks, tobacco, cotton, coffee, sugarcane, cattle, rice, diamonds, stones of various kinds, cocoa, and fish. Now, all of these products are represented by several nations using child labor. I'll allow you to look at the list and examine that in a little more detail. So think about these products. Think about that the next time you go to a coffee shop. Well, where does that coffee come from? Does it come from a country or a business that does business with one of these countries using child labor? Is that a product you'd like to support? So, depending on where the product comes from, the child labor may be involved in producing the product. So, as I mentioned, our goal is to really identify the conditions under which the slaves had to work, and hopefully we can make a connection to the difficult labor of children throughout the world, and connect the two experiences. Okay, what we have here is a graphic organizer I created for the activity, and it's broken into three sections. You have section one for question one, which is providing a space for you to write in your findings for source A, B, C, and D. The boxes will expand as you type. So the first area is asking you about how this resource helps you answer question one. And to remind you, question one is what conditions supported sugar production and slavery in the Western Hemisphere? So, why did sugar production begin in the Western Hemisphere? That's what it's asking. And the resources should provide you with some um, good evidence to support your statement. So, really, the first box is somewhat of an overview or a summary of what you find in the resource. And then the second box is the specific evidence that proves your statement. Okay, question two is asking how was sugar cultivated in the Western Hemisphere? So, this is the process. How do they make sugar? And there is resource A provided. And then following resource A is resource B, which includes five different pictures of action that's taking place on a sugar plantation. And then finally, question three, what was life like for enslaved Africans on sugar plantations in the Western Hemisphere? Source A includes a statement from Olaudah Equiano, who was a slave, and he tells you a little bit of what it was like to be on the Middle Passage. And remember, we've already learned about the Middle Passage. We've read Alexander Falconbridge's document, and we've also analyzed some images from the Middle Passage. So that should not be unfamiliar to you. And then the second document has three very short paragraphs describing life as a sugar plantation slave. Okay, our first resource here is a short reading, and it is about the island of Barbados. And what it's really describing is that the people to discover it, Christopher Columbus included, found it to be an ideal place to plant sugar. And he gives some specific details on why that's the case. You can see my math equation down there. Converting the temperature Celsius to Fahrenheit for you. It's 1.8 times the Celsius temperature plus 32 degrees. So you can see where both the islands of New Guinea and Barbados have a similar temperature of 86 degrees. It's humid and wet. So just imagine, Connecticut in the middle of late July, hot, humid, and 86 degrees. Okay, resource B here has an image of slaves working a sugar plantation with the sturdy sugar cane, and it gives you a little general background of life on a sugar plantation and where the slaves came from. Resource C is a map depicting the historical movements of the slave trade. Of course, this should be review information for you, as we created a bar graph with some of this information and analyzed where most of the slaves to the New World went, and identified the number that went to the southern United States. And finally, resource D is a very interesting line graph that gives you a little bit of understanding on the increased demand for sugar and some of the economics behind it. So this one will require a little analysis, but I think you'll find it very interesting.